Today on Fact Space, we're talking about Egyptian afterlife facts. The Egyptians are people native to Egypt, a country whose vast population has one of the most interesting and lengthy histories in the world. Dating back several millennia BCE, the culture surrounding the Egyptians bleeds over into the afterlife, where the trials that the dead must go through are oftentimes harder than what they face in life. Here are a few facts about the Egyptian afterlife that may or may not surprise you. Number 7. Pyramid space travel. If you know anything about Egypt, then you probably know that one of the most popular pieces of their civilization are pyramids. Pyramids are large, triangular structures that have a place in many cultures, most famously in Egypt. These beautiful creations, shaped like sun rays and usually made from brick, aren't just designed to tower above the ground and look interesting. They're there as a passageway for the dead to reach the afterlife. Pharaohs are buried in pyramids with all of their belongings, not just to preserve them, but to ensure that they can make it up to space. Originally, Egyptians believed that only the pharaohs could reach the afterlife, which is why they were the only ones who were allowed to be buried in pyramids. Eventually, however, this belief expanded to allow all Egyptians to reach the afterlife, but for a long time, it was believed that reaching this point required pyramid space travel. Number 6. Dead have to eat. It goes without saying that once a person dies and their body shuts down, they no longer require the essentials that people need to survive, such as food, water, and oxygen. But Egyptians believe that eating is a vital part of death. In order for a person to pass over into the afterlife successfully, they must be provided with food while they cross over through the underworld duat, and this can only be done by manually stuffing a statue version of the person with meat. Without this form of sustenance, the deceased person cannot properly make their way to the afterlife. Therefore, if a person does not have people in place to feed their statue bodies beef when they die, they won't be able to make it anywhere according to these beliefs. Number 5. Mummified fighters. When it comes to ancient Egyptian beliefs, every step to get to the afterlife is very precise and important, including the preparation of their bodies. When a person dies, according to the Egyptians, their soul splits into two parts to represent the essence of the person and their personality. While one side of the soul travels to Duat to fight through the underworld, the other flies through the sky until it must return at night to the body of the person to recharge. If the person's body has decayed past recognition, then the soul cannot return. The problem with this is that if one part of the soul has not passed through Duat and made it to the afterlife yet, and the other part of the soul doesn't have a body to return to, then the soul loses any opportunity to go anywhere. Instead, it will float through oblivion for all of eternity. In order to help prevent this from happening, the Egyptians would mummify the bodies of pharaohs, giving them the best chance of preserving their human bodies long enough for their souls to make it to the afterlife. Not everyone had this opportunity, however. Therefore, those who couldn't become mummies would rest in shallow graves where dry temperatures helped to keep their bodies intact for as long as possible. Number 4. 12 Gates of Hell. Crossing through Duat is the only way to reach the land of ever-growing crops and eternal happiness, Aru. This isn't a simple achievement, as Duat is an entire mythical world of its own, filled with monsters, gods, demons, and other terrifying elements. In order to make it to Aru, a person must travel through 12 different gates. These gates are protected by guardians, and each one requires the person to complete a new task. For example, at one gate, two gods disguise themselves as gorgeous women and attempt to seduce the soul passing through. At each stop, if the soul of the person passing through does not successfully get through the gate, each guardian has its own gruesome method of ripping them to shreds, either destroying their soul or forcing them to spend the rest of eternity floating through oblivion. Number 3. If one dies, they all die. It may sound macabre, but during ancient times, Egyptian pharaohs were adamant that they bring their servants with them into the afterlife. Since they had become accustomed to having these people in life, it only made sense to them that they would remain together in death. Once a pharaoh had died, whomever they had chosen to bring with them would be taken to their tomb and poisoned so that they would cross over too. In some cases, pharaohs would take a few dozen servants with them, but in the most extreme cases, one pharaoh took upward of 500 people into the afterlife. Sometimes, pharaohs even took family members with them, such as in the case of one leader who had his young son poisoned so that they could spend the afterlife together. Number 2. The Heart Test. As you can probably imagine, fighting through Duat and reaching Aru is a very difficult thing to accomplish, and it doesn't finish even when you reach the end of the journey. To finalize matters, the soul would be judged by the gods, specifically the ruler of Duat, Osiris. There, the soul would be tested to see if they had broken any laws, and whether or not their heart was innocent and worthy enough to pass into Aru. Unfortunately, this didn't always work out in the favor of the soul. Despite fighting tooth and nail to reach Aru, many souls were turned away. Typically, Osiris would toss them to Ammit, a monster who would destroy their soul by ripping them to shreds, torturing them by various means, and even incinerating them. There was only one other way to get into Aru without passing the heart test, which is our final Egyptian afterlife fact. Number 1. Osiris's body. If a soul wasn't declared worthy enough to pass the god's judgment, then they had one final option before their soul would be destroyed. Another land lived at the border of the sky, and this is where the great Osiris's body had been buried. Reaching this place was even more dangerous and difficult than getting through the 12 gates of hell, because his body was encased with fire and darkness, sealed away in a structure referred to only as the Sealed Thing. Attempting to reach his body would grant the soul eternal life in Aru. However, no one had even gotten close to Osiris's tomb, making this option an absolute last resort and fearsome path to immortality. Regardless, sometimes this was the only way that a soul could go without being destroyed. But as you probably know by now, nothing is guaranteed when it comes to the Egyptian afterlife. If you're new here or haven't subscribed already, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and also the bell so you don't miss anything from FactSpace.